Good morning, everyone. I'm Lynn Israel, and I'm helping Lou Hebert present the service this morning. Tina Jones and Steve Israel are providing technical assistance, and Ted Goldman is our music director. Please be aware we are recording this service, and it will be posted on our YouTube page. For privacy, we do pause the recording during our joys and concerns, sharing of joys and concerns. Please remember to put your phone on mute or do not disturb. And at the end of the service, after we extinguish the chalice, we will have announcements. We join together this morning to seek justice, equality, and fairness in the world. Our hearts are touched by the human need we feel around us, whether far away or within reach of our hands. We come here to be together because this is how we believe our lives are best lived: in questioning and in conversation, in compassion and in service, in gratitude and in joy, in companionship and in love. It is good to be together with you this morning. Now, if this is your first service here this morning at MVUUC, and I do see a couple of new faces, welcome. Note that we are a diverse group of people with varying interests and beliefs, and our services are varied in format, tone, and topic. We encourage you to attend several services to get a better idea of what we're really about. You can't judge us based on one service because you never really know what's going to happen. Also, please complete a blue information card that's located in the pocket on the back of the chair so that we can learn a little bit about you and answer any questions that you might have, and so that we can start sending you our email newsletter that comes out once a week. Let's see here. Okay. Take a moment now, everyone, to think of your friends at MVUUC, people who aren't here today, people who are here today. Take a moment to greet each other, and also people at home who are watching us on Zoom. Feel free to comment in the chat box. Let us support one another. Go ahead. The chalice will be lit today by Tom Edge. Please join me in reading these words adapted from Erica Hewitt for the lighting of the chalice, and they appear as a comment in the chat box as well online. To be a Unitarian Universalist, something's wrong. It's not the one that's in my script. Let's do that one, I guess. Committed to respond to the call of a wounded world, we join together this day with loving hearts, hands, and minds, embracing the interconnected web of water, air, and earth. We light a fire of sustaining hope, ever bright with love and justice, as we give thanks for this earth, our shared and singular home. May we dedicate ourselves to its ongoing care. And now for our first musical selection, I'm going to turn it over to Ted.
We're having some strange microphone stand issues today. This doesn't want to stay up, it's just falling back down, but we'll, it just seems to go with the theme of things not quite working right. So that's okay. For anyone who is coming back after a little while or is your first time, we don't care if you sing in tune. We just want you to make some sounds with us. You can speak the words. We've got a little spring song to start with. The words are up there, or you can look at number 63 in the gray books if you want to follow along with the melody. But I'm going to teach us the melody first anyway. It's a short hymn and there's only 2 verses. I'll play through the melody once and you can sort of scan as I play, and then we'll sing together. So I'm just going to play through so you can hear the way it goes. Let's try the first part of it together. The first part is the A section, the spring has now unwrapped her flowers. So let's just give that little section a shot once to go there. It goes like this. And spring has now unwrapped the flowers. The day is fast approaching. Good, you got the words right. I actually got the words wrong. Okay, good. That's our first part. The part I want to work on just for a second, because it's going to trip everybody up, is in the middle where it says gone. It's gone up there. Gone, it's going to start up here. So it's a surprising kind of move. It goes from here to gone, the iron touch of cold, winter time and frost time. Okay, so that's the part that's going to trip us up. So when we get here, it's going to go up to gone. Okay, so that's the thing to remember. So let's start from the beginning and we'll get this. I'll play us a little intro. Time. Herb and plant that winter long slumbered at their leisure, now be stirring green and strong, find in growth their pleasure. All the world with beauty fills, gold the green enhancing, flowers make thee among the hills, set the meadows dancing. Luke?
Hi, how you doing? Good. It's and that song was appropriate for the reading here, which is opening words. It is May, the merry, merry month of May. Maypoles and flowers and festive springtime activities. It's a wonderful and beautiful morning like it was today. But May is also known for something else that's maybe not quite as light and breezy. May is also known for the recognition of the American labor movement. Now, I know we have Labor Day in September, but actually around the world, May is known as a month and a time to honor and recognize the efforts and the struggles of those who actually put together organized labor and created that. And it was a very, very long struggle and story of sacrifice, includes the names of many people you may have heard of and some that you may have not. Samuel Gompers, John L. Lewis, Mother Jones, Eugene Debs, Esther Peterson, Cesar Chavez, Waldemar Velasquez here locally, and Joe Hillstrom, also known as Joe Hill. It was in 1914 that Joe Hill was working to organize the miners in the silver mines near Salt Lake City. And while he was very popular with the workers there, not so much with the leaders and the captains of industry. But Joe Hill was very influential, and they didn't really care for his leadership abilities, and he was making trouble, good trouble. So it was, I guess, no surprise that many people looked very skeptically when Joe Hill was arrested for a double murder of a store clerk and his son, without really much evidence at all. In fact, it was mostly circumstantial evidence, very little eyewitness evidence or nothing forensically that linked him to that. But nonetheless, Joe Hill, this native of Sweden, itinerant labor organizer, some said a hobo, a poet, a dreamer, songwriter, reputed anarchist, he was a villain in the eyes of many in Salt Lake City in 1914, and thus he was convicted of that double murder with little evidence and put before a firing squad. True to Joe Hill's nature, he was actually unafraid when he stood before that firing squad. As the story goes, he actually ordered the squad to pull the trigger, and they did. Before that, he had written a poem about his pending death. That poem is, "My will is easy to decide, for there is nothing to divide. My kin don't need to fuss and moan, moss does not cling to a rolling stone. My body, oh, if I could choose, I would to ashes it reduce, and let the merry breezes blow, my dust to where some flowers grow. Perhaps some fading flower then would come to life and bloom again." Good luck to all of you. Joe's final words. His body was sent on to Chicago, where he was cremated. His ashes, it said, were put into envelopes and sent to every state, to union locals in every state in the union except for Utah. And those ashes were to be tossed to the wind on May Day in hopes that his ashes would bloom again. And so it is said that he never died, but his ashes do bloom again with every labor strike and struggle, and with the flowers every May. Ergo the story of Joe Hill, who is still very much alive.
I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. Says I, "But Joe, you're 10 years dead." "I never died," says he. "I never died," says he. In Salt Lake City, Joe, says I, him standing by my side. "They framed you on a murder charge," says Joe, "I never died." Says Joe, "I never died." The copper bosses, they shot you, Joe. They filled you full of lead. Takes more than guns to kill a man, says Joe, "and I ain't dead." Says Joe, "and I ain't dead." I'm standing there as big as life and smiling with his eyes. Says Joe, "What they forgot to kill went on to organize, went on to organize." In San Diego, up to Maine, in every mine and mill, where working men defend their rights, it's there you'll find Joe Hill. It's there you'll find Joe Hill. I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he.
Now, it should not come as a shock to many of you who know me. I'm a bit of a history nut. And as you may suspect, I'm a time traveler. I love to go on journeys back in time, see what happened on a given day, a given week, a given year, to get a closer look, up front and closer look at just how things were on this pathway to where we are today. And so today, I would like you to come with me on this journey. Back to 1934, on this day, May 21st, 89 years ago. The place was Toledo, Ohio. Toledo, like the rest of the nation on that day, was reeling from the Great Depression. Unemployment was massive. Joblessness had hit at least half of the workforce in many cities, or at least underemployment, and those who were making money were not making much of it. The city workers in Toledo, for example, many of them had been laid off. Large sections of the city had been shut down, and those city workers were given script, which was basically a city IOU that they could use to buy food and other essential items. Soup lines were long, and hope was short. There were other stories besides the Depression, though, that occupied the front pages of the paper on that day. One man who dealt with the Great Depression in his own way was John Dillinger. He robbed banks. He was front and center in the news. He had just pulled off a big bank job up in Flint, Michigan the week before. So the nation was looking for him. He was now public enemy number one, and everybody was looking for John Dillinger, and Toledo included. And lots of folks in Toledo keeping an eye out. Iola Bowles she was a waitress at a frozen custard shop in West Toledo. She was sure the customer who came in that day was John Dillinger. She said it to other customers, and they all agreed. Well, he looks just like John Dillinger. And he must be, because he's driving a big fancy car with Illinois plates. So they called Toledo police, and Toledo police got there and checked the guy out. Sure enough, he came in, he was from Illinois, but he came in for a sandwich and a drink, and he was not John Dillinger. The nation was also in a frenzy and a hunt for the desperados Bonnie and Clyde. They too were bank robbers. And on this day in 1934, a posse of lawmen lay in wait on a road in Saylorsville, Louisiana, on a rural part of that road, where they knew that the murdering bandit duo lovers were going to be passing by. And they did. 2 days later, they passed by. They stopped that gray Ford sedan. They opened fire on Bonnie and Clyde, riddled the car with bullets, and Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker, and their tragic story came to an end. In Toledo, 8th grader Walter Hale on this day had prevented some bloodshed. He was a safety guard on the playground over at Franklin School, and there was a 9-year-old girl who was being attacked by a mongrel dog. And young Walter grabbed that girl away from the teeth of the dog and shoved her into a doorway of the school, saved her life. He chased the dog to a nearby home and waited for police. Another thing that was happening that week was Brand Whitlock. You've maybe heard that name. Brand Whitlock was a longtime mayor of Toledo, 4-term mayor. He was also the ambassador to Belgium in World War I. He was dying in a Paris hospital that week, and did later in the week. At the Paramount Theater downtown, Barbara Stanwyck was starring in The Gambler's Lady, while over at the State Theater on Collingwood, Katharine Hepburn was thrilling audiences playing the lead in the tense drama called Spitfire, about a very independent and rebellious young woman. But there was another drama in Toledo that was playing out that was actually drawing more crowds and more interest, and this one was happening not in a theater, but on a street called Champlain Street. It had a cast of thousands, and it was about to reach its climax. I think we have a video clip that will show a little bit of what was going on there at that time. What you see here is actual newsreel footage of the last and final week of a bitter and violent strike that was unfolding on Champlain Street in North Toledo, in front of the electric Autolite factory. It's where they made headlights and other electrical parts for cars. It was a labor action by over 1,500 workers at that plant that had begun a month before, as the workers demanded an increase in salary, safer working conditions, and recognition of their fledgling union. What began as an orderly strike action with picket lines and workers, men and women both carrying picket signs, had within weeks devolved into chaos. And by the end, it was aflame as a powder keg of raw emotions that kindled a week of violence and riots. Eventually, gunshots and unrest that the city of Toledo and even the nation had ever witnessed before. This was not just any strike. This one held special significance. For in 1934, against the backdrop of the national oppression that had plunged much of Toledo and the nation's working class into starvation, poverty, thousands of workers who dared to walk off their jobs in the middle of a job shortage and a depression, that was a high-risk calculation. That was risky business. They knew they could just as easily lose their jobs because there were few worker protections at that time for strikers. While there had been some new legislation passed that gave workers a little leverage in the courts, the giant corporations, the captains of industry, they were still the ironclad rulers over the workplace. What they said was the law. And workers had very few legal remedies, really, to challenge the status quo at that point. In the recently published book, Champlain Street, The Battle of Chestnut Hill, author Victoria Arendt tells the story of this struggle in novel form through the personal narratives of many of the players of this drama, from the workers themselves, the union organizers, the secretaries who worked in the plant, even the guardsmen called to duty, and the many reporters who came to Toledo to witness this crucible of the American labor movement that was taking place. In one of the passages of the book, she relates the story of a man she called Casper, who was a punch press operator at the plant. Now, a punch press operator in Department 2 at Electric Autolite in 1934 was by far and away the most dangerous position in that plant. You were working with very fast-moving machinery, with stamped-out pieces of metal. Your job was to keep it moving as fast as possible. There was a quota. You had to reach that quota. The machine didn't slow down. It kept moving, and if you were too slow, or you didn't get your hands out of the way fast enough, your hand could be caught in it, and you could lose your fingers. It was not unusual for the punch press operators at Autolite to have fewer than 10 fingers. There was no compensation for it either. You lost a finger, there was no sympathy, there was no time off. In fact, if you lost a finger, you might lose your job. In the passage from this book, she writes, the punch press machine was splattered with blood. Sitting on the plate was the end of a finger. Casper jumped from his bench and raced over to the operator, Joe, who was holding his wrist as his hand violently shook while he was screaming in pain. The foreman, though, was ranting about the stopped machine. Casper and the union organizer, Charlie Rigby, put their arm around Joe's back and got him back to the bench. Joe fell onto the bench and cried, wincing as he glanced at the two wiggling tendons from where the finger used to be. The foreman shouted, "It's broken." Another man yelled back, "It's not broken, it's missing." The foreman said, "I'm not talking about his finger, I'm talking about the machine." The foreman then marched over to Joe, the punch press operator, and said, "Ring out, you're fired." These stories of cruel treatment filtered through the ranks every day. As the workers talked amongst themselves, the word spread quickly. Not just among the Autolite workers did they know about this, but the leaders of this fledgling union were very quick to let others in the city know what was going on inside that plant, including the unemployed, the many jobless, because they wanted them to know what was going on so they wouldn't be too eager to try to fill those empty slots. So it was not just the strikers that showed up on Champlain Street. each day with signs and placards of protest. But other sympathizers from around the city, in fact, many other men, jobless and desperate, were drawn to that growing crowd every day. And as the crowds grew larger, the men who ran the plant, like Clement Menninger, the founder of the company, and Arthur Minch, the plant manager, were not really willing to go along with the workers' demands. Wouldn't even bargain with the union, actually. Their resolve to break the strike grew steely and bitter with each passing day, and to say they were unsympathetic was an understatement. They went so far as to hire thugs to beat up the workers and did what they could to intimidate and threaten. At one point, there were so many people out there on Champlain Street gathering each day that the plant bosses decided to get a court order from a friendly judge, an injunction to keep the number of strikers to a minimum and keep them confined to the sidewalks near the plant. And the union and the sympathizers said, no, we don't think we're going to do that. So they broke that injunction. And at one point in the middle of May, the sheriff's department was called to arrest the groups of strikers. You can see somebody being taken away there. This went on that day. 48 in all were arrested, taken to Lucas County Jail. The judge in the case did not want to try all of the men and convict them. He said, don't have enough room in the jail, don't have enough room in the courtroom. So he said, let's just put the union leaders on trial. So they called the union leader, Charlie Rigby, to the stand, and they said, did you break the injunction? Charlie Rigby says, of course, I'm guilty. Yes, I'm guilty. I've been breaking the injunction and I intend to do so. And that moment, in sort of a Spartacus moment, the crowd of strikers that were jamming this courtroom all stood up and said, if he's guilty, we are all guilty. If he is guilty, we're all guilty. We're all going to go to jail because we were there too. There was a loud eruption, cheers and clapping. The judge, Judge Stewart, was incensed. He slammed his gavel down and tried to get order, but could not get any order. And he said, well, I can't put you all in jail. So case dismissed. Well, it was a small victory. It was a victory, albeit a small one though, but it energized the workers and the numbers only grew larger in front of the plant as the weeks went by. And by this point, in the final days of the strike, the atmosphere was starting to get electric and supercharged with emotion and rancor. Feelings not tempered, though. You can see fire hoses. The company actually got fire hoses out, started spraying the workers with the fire hoses. The workers, though, got control of the fireworkers and started spraying them back at the deputies and the police. No good deed goes unpunished. Eruptions of violence continued to flare. Bottles and bricks and stones flew in both directions. There were beatings of strikers by police and beatings of strike breakers by the striking workers. Anger was on both sides. The scene on the street was getting turbulent and restless by the day. Trouble was brewing. The National Guard was called in by Governor White. It was the largest peacetime deployment ever of the National Guard in the state of Ohio at that point. The young recruits were armed with rifles and machine guns. Plant managers Menninger and Minch also supplied them with a good supply of hundreds of grenades and bombs loaded with what was called vomit gas to be deployed against the crowd that had assembled outside the factory. These are just some of the photos taken on those climactic days when chaos was the order of the day. A lot of the pictures taken by the national press reporters and local photographers who flooded the city as this giant auto plant was brought to its knees and the streets were erupting in violence. It was a war. By any definition, it was a war. The National Guard had set up machine gun posts as cars were set ablaze and overturned, and the soldiers and the guards hurled gas bombs at the crowd. The crowd would throw them back, aiming for the windows of executive offices, including that's the office of Clement Menninger, the owner, who at this point had escaped the plant to the safety of a nearby hotel. In the book Champlain Street, with some edits for time, this is how the riot was described at one point. Casper, the punch press operator, was on a corner sidewalk. Another gas bomb assault was underway. People were rushing past him as he planted his feet and let his body be pushed one way and then the other. Then another bomb dropped in the middle of the street. He held his handkerchief to his nose and crouched down, lying flat between two houses, waiting to be trampled. Casper struggled to breathe. He was on his hands and knees. He managed to avoid the thick of the smoke, but his throat and his chest felt tight. He looked at one of the houses. He looked inside through a window, and he saw a woman and a crying baby. Casper couldn't tear his eyes away from the scene that was distressing and shocking to him. The smoke and the battle of the bricks and the bottles and the National Guard troops did not seem to deter the determination of the strikers nor the crowd. On the 21st of May, on this anniversary, it said the crowd numbered about 2,000 outside the factory. Each day, more people showed up, so that by the morning of the 24th of May, there were as many as 10,000 people amassed outside the plant. The tension and the anxiety was palpable. Catharsis was coming. Outside the plant on Champlain Street, there was a sea of restless humanity churning with anger. Inside the plant, there was fear, because there were still people trapped inside of the plant. They couldn't get out. Workers were trapped inside secretaries up on the second and third floor. All they could do was look outside their windows and see and hear the gathering storm that was out there. They had no way out, and the bricks kept crashing through the windows. They were ushered into one room for safety, and somehow they did get food smuggled in so they could at least eat, but they couldn't go home. In the book, Victoria Arendt, the author, writes about two women who are really a composite character of the many secretaries, Edith and Genevieve. At one point she wrote, "There are two windows in there," Genevieve said, "but they're both broken." Edith looked past her workmate into the covered walkway that was nearby. It was a dark tunnel with a smoky moonbeam showing. Every few minutes, the elevated walkway would rattle and shake from a stone hitting the metal exterior. A couple of days later, the plant management did manage to get all of the workers out. They had armed guards and buses, and they were able to move them out and arrange an escape route to a waiting bus. As they got on the bus and they looked at the scene around them, they looked back at the building and they saw a platoon of soldiers with rifles and squads of National Guardsmen all around with fixed bayonets now. Things were getting serious. A large cannon was poised and pointed up to what was known as Chestnut Hill, where the workers were massed. The scene was ominous. On the morning of May 24th, the tension finally broke, snapped with an eruption. In what will be forever known as the Battle of Chestnut Hill, the mob moved towards the National Guardsmen. A heavy volley of bricks flew towards the guardsmen. They, in return, picked them up and hurled them back at the crowd. Many on both sides were hit by the bricks and bottles, were bleeding, and some people falling. And tear gas wafted over the street battle, and orders were shouted to the troops, and they began to march, run on the pickets. And then the pickets were no longer hit with bricks, but then they were hit with bullets. The order to shoot had come suddenly. And as rifle fire rained in on the crowd, dozens fell wounded, some slightly, others gravely. Two men never got up. As suddenly as it started, it seemed to all end, at least for a while, and grew very quiet. The gas smoke drifted away, revealing knots of men trying to help the wounded, and others standing over the bodies of those who would not survive. Their names were Frank Hubey and Steve Saignan. Their lives ended, but not their memory. Ironically, they were not Autolite workers, nor were they strikers, but they were two bystanders who, like thousands of others that day on May 24th, 1934, came down to Champlain Street to be a witness to history, and instead, they became a part of it. The punctuation of lethal gunfire was brutal and shocking that day. The city was stunned, as was much of the nation, which had been following the events through news accounts. Even as the crowds thinned in the following day around the plant, the strike did linger on. It was not over, lasted for another week or so, but there was pressure put on the company at this point. Autolite and the union finally sat down to a bargaining table with federal labor negotiators under the possibility that there could be a general strike, which had been called for by anarchists who were in Toledo at that point, calling for a general strike for every business to shut down. Autolite finally agreed to recognize the union and agreed to its demands. It was a major inflection point in the labor movement, and union leaders were elated. And by the first week of June, a celebration was held. You could see people massed on the streets of downtown Toledo in celebration for this moment. The Toledo victory was the product of militant tactics, radical leadership, and the rank and file workers, and even the unemployed taking the lead. It would have ramifications for the rest of the labor movement for years to come. As Arthur Prius, labor historian, said, the path was finally open for organization of the entire automobile industry. It would also usher in new federal laws protecting workers' rights to organize and give other workers some real incentive to create other unions, and that's what happened. The next year, there was a major strike at the Chevrolet plant in Flint, Michigan, and that strike produced what is now the United Auto Workers Union, the UAW. It also created laws and standards that affect all workers today, not just those who wear a union label, that when unions exist and benefit, all workers benefit. Molly Ivins, one of my favorite authors, and the late Molly Ivins, I should say, and observers of our time, said, although it is only about 20% of American workers who are in unions, 20% set the standards across the board in salaries and working conditions. And if you're making a decent salary in a non-union company, you owe it to the unions. What happened in Toledo this week, 89 years ago, was on one hand a tragedy. On the other, it was a story of triumph. And so Toledo is remembered as one of the important fields from which the American labor movement was nurtured and grew from the seeds of discontent. It was watered by the sweat and the blood of thousands of the working class in the struggle. And of this fact, from those, we should take pride in that in this area. In John Steinbeck's novel, In Dubious Battle, about union organizing in the 1930s in the fields of California, he wrote, from these seeds, something good is going to grow, and it makes it all worthwhile. The electric auto light plant on Champlain Street is now history. It's gone. The building shut down when Electric Auto Light went out of business in 1962. And strangely enough, that building sat empty. That giant corpse of a building sat empty for over 30 years. Until 1999, it sat there as sort of a haunting and decaying reminder of what had evolved on those streets in 1934. It's gone now, but certainly not the legacy. So what does stand there on Champlain Street now is a memorial, built about 20 years ago to remember and honor those who sacrificed and made trouble. And as the late Congressman John Lewis would say, good trouble. Good trouble that planted seeds. And from the seeds that were planted 89 years ago this week, something good did indeed grow. And like labor instigator and itinerant Joe Hill, still very much alive. Thank you.
Mighty hard road that my poor hand has hold. My poor feet has traveled a hot, dusty road. Out of your dust bowl and westward we rolled, and your desert was hot and your mountains was cold. I worked in your orchards of peaches and prunes, slept on the ground in the light of your moon. On the edge of your city you'll see us, and then we come with the dust and we go with the wind. California and Arizona, I make all your crops, and it's north up to Oregon to gather your hops. Dig the beets from your ground, cut the grapes from your vine, to set on your table your light sparkling wine. Green pastures of plenty from dry desert ground, from that grand coulee dam where the water runs down. Ever stayed in this union us migrants have been. We'll work in this fight and we'll fight till we win. Well, it's always we ramble, that river and I, all along your green valley I'll work till I die. My land I'll defend with my life if it be, 'cause my pastures of plenty must always be free.
Lou's reflection today speaks directly to the UU second principle, which is summarized by the UUA website thusly: justice, equity, and compassion in human relations points us towards something beyond inherent worth and dignity. It points us to the larger community. It gets at collective responsibility. It reminds us that treating people as human beings is not something that we simply do one-on-one, but something that has systemic implications and can inform our entire cultural way of being. Now we're going to pass our offertory basket. Visitors, we welcome you to donate cash or via our PayPal link using the QR code in the basket. Please note that what predominantly supports our little church community here is annual pledges by our members or our friends. The yellow cards that you might see in the pockets on the back of the chairs are used to indicate this support, and people can place them in the offertory basket just to show that they do pledge. We encourage anyone that believes in our mission to consider becoming a member and to pledge support. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and pass those baskets.
For our offertory music, we're going to go on another little historical journey, but this time a little further back to Mozart.
Yeah.
And whenever we do classical music, which is not too often, but whenever we do classical music, I like to say a little bit about it because it's not most people's lingua franca when it comes to music. And I think today's a good day to do that because we heard already a few songs in the service, and as you might notice with songs, each song typically has one affect, one mood or feeling, which persists roughly throughout the song. That's sort of the way popular music has been for quite a while now. Well, go back a little further, especially in instrumental music, it's very common for the music to go through a whole bunch of different moods and feelings and things like that, all in the course of what would be around the same amount of time as one song today. So it's a little bit like sampling cuisine from another place. If it's not something you expect, you go in and it feels foreign and alien and unfamiliar. But if you go into it thinking, oh, this isn't going to be what I'm used to, instead, it's going to be something that takes me to a lot of different places, then it can help sort of prime the pump, if you will, for receiving a different kind of music. So for me, for this one, it starts as a very kind of slow, tentative dance. It's the middle of one of Mozart's piano sonatas, but I'll let you decide for yourself where it goes from there.
Now is the time for the sharing of joys, concerns, and milestones. Tina, please stop.
For Lisa, right? I mean, how can we not sing for Lisa? So. So on that not so silent note, we usually take a moment now to just be with our joys and concerns or our thoughts and breathe all together for a moment. And after I play a few quiet sounds, we can all take a moment of silence together. I'm always looking for ways to use these awesome instruments that Lynn has left here, so I'm going to try to incorporate one of those into this now. Let's see. No? Hard to do this and play at the same time.
Our closing words today are adapted from an article written by UUA President Reverend Susan Frederick Gray regarding social justice and the labor movement. In April 2022, she wrote this: "We are witnessing a growing labor movement built by and for working class people that is pushing back against a system of exploitative capitalism that concentrates wealth in the hands of a few people. It is a movement coming alive from the bravery and brilliance of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, women, LGBTQ, undocumented immigrants, and poor and disabled communities. Poverty is a policy choice. Together, we can pass legislation that honors workers' dignity, values labor, and holds the quality of every life as sacred. An economic system that produces record profits during the COVID-19 pandemic while plunging millions more people into poverty is immoral. 64% of people in the United States live paycheck to paycheck. Working class Americans pay a higher tax rate than billionaires, are hit hardest when rising gas prices make getting to work difficult or impossible, and suffer under a political economy that prioritizes profits over people. As people of faith and conscience, we rejoice in recent historic wins for workers at Starbucks and Amazon facilities, including successful unionization efforts in Buffalo and Staten Island. This is the righteous work of people joining together across differences to demand dignity, safety, and justice. The basic right and ability to live, to be housed, to access health care and be active members of thriving communities should not be an exclusive reward for labor. Our value and dignity is not calculated by hours we toil. It is our birthright. As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm the practice of democracy in our institutions and our larger world. This is what democracy looks like. To those on the picket line, we say, strike. Yes, we can. Sí se puede. To those unjustly and illegally fired from their jobs for union organizing, we want you to know that we are with you. And to all who believe in justice and democracy in our government, our communities, and in our workplaces, we join you in solidarity. Please join me now in reading the words, a continuation of our chalice lighting verse, for extinguishing our chalice that can be found in your order of service or in the Zoom chat box. As we extinguish the chalice's flame, may we remember that to be a Unitarian Universalist also means we are not alone in the work. We are not alone because of our promises to love one another. We are not alone because we are companions on the journey. We grow ourselves into allies, helping one another get free, because none of us is truly free until we are all free. And now it's time for announcements. Does anybody have any announcements? Megan!
I'll make it really fast. Just if you are a member of this congregation, we need you to stay after service for our congregational meeting. If you are not or not yet a member of this congregation, you are free to leave. But regardless, after service ends, we will have a brief, like 5 to 10 minute intermission. There are some snacks out in the social hall because we don't want any hangry voters in the congregational meeting. But we will have a brief break for bathroom and snacks, and then voting members, please come back into the sanctuary for the congregational meeting, which we will try to keep as short as possible. I'm hoping 20 minutes or less. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Also, non-members can stay if you want. If it interests you, you're welcome to stay. You just can't vote, that's all. Okay, I have 2 announcements. The first one is from Noelle, and she wanted me to remind everyone that next week's service will actually be a picnic for the holiday, so we won't have this, but we will have a grill, and you can socialize, and you can bring something to put on the grill, and you can bring something to have with your whatever you have on the grill, and just hang out and be groovy. But we need someone who would be willing to man the grill. So if you're willing to be the grill master, that's important because we need someone to sort of like be in charge of that. If you're interested in doing that, please let Noelle know at president@mvuuc.org, just so that we're sure we have someone who knows how to do it, because not everybody does. Also, she wanted me to let you know that we've started the RE play structure. So we're putting it together. They got things organized yesterday and started putting it together, but they still have a lot to do. And so we need more hands. So Noelle, is willing to be here Saturday next week to put it together if she has people to help. Okay, if you're willing to help on Saturday, please email Noelle, again, president@mvuuc.org, so that she knows, yes, people want to come Saturday. She also is going to be doing it on Sunday during the picnic. So you have a couple of chances to help out with that. And the other thing is, say it with me, blood drive. You are correct. June 24th, 9 to 2. Anyone 16 or over can donate, 16 with parents' consent. And, tell your family, tell your friends. If you'd like to donate, you can sign up online. You can ask me. I'll be happy to get you signed up. This is the last blood drive for this year here. We'll start again next year in March, but let's go out with a bang and let's get lots and lots and lots and lots of blood. Thank you. What? Why is what? I'm tired. I do 4 a year, and it's a lot of work. And so right now we're just doing spring, summer, and then we kind of take the fall, winter off as a break.
Okay, let's join in singing This Is My Song, which is number 159 in your book.